You've got questions, I've got answers. It's Raider week. Let's talk some Chiefs. Welcome to Chief of the North Thursday. I'm Seth Kaiser, the Chief of the North. I'm once again back in the old office. It's Raider week. You're going to say, Seth, you're wearing black. I'm wearing red. And look, until those 30 pounds come off, and I'm sure it's coming any day now, despite the fact that I'm not eating better or exercising, black is easier than working out. But I've got the red tie. We're ready to go. It's going to be a great week. I have a bunch of mailbag questions from you guys. I appreciate all of them. Most of them are originating from Twitter, so keep in mind, if you want, you put in the comment section here below, not during the live stream as it comes out, but in the actual comment section. If you put mailbag or a bunch of question marks before then, I'll give those first priority, and then I will check Twitter every week, Wednesday. As ever, make sure to like, subscribe, do all those things that Ryan would tell you to do already because he's much more of a professional than me. But as for me, I've got mailbag questions, so let's get to them. Honestly, you guys have just shown up so often here. So we're going to dive right into it. Remember, we're doing this every week, every Thursday, and then also every Monday we do our weekly. This next week it'll be Tuesday, our weekly we call it, we can call it Keys in the Kingdom. We can call it Monday Morning with Chief of the North, except this time it won't be Monday morning, but I digress. All right, let's do some mailbag questions. Ross Sawyer asks, what are the early returns on Leo Chanel? Getting the Reggie Ragland treatment we hoped for. The early returns on Leo Chanel, one thing that I would just note is that he has been able to fill in to an extent. His role hasn't increased that much, but he's been able to fill in a few gaps with Willie Gay Jr. suspended. He's been able to fill in with a few gaps where perhaps Reggie Ragland would not have been able to. Overall, though, he's mostly filling in at the Sam linebacker. He's a guy who's on the field when there's three linebackers. The Reggie Ragland treatment is kind of a good way to sum that up. He's shown some weaknesses in coverage, but he also does occasionally flash the kind of speed that might allow him to eventually make up for those things. People are kind of expecting to see him make an improvement in that area the way Nick Bolton did. Two things I would say with that. One, Nick Bolton has shown a couple times this year that as much as he's improved in that area, that there's still some limitations that exist there. The second thing is you can't expect a lot of players to overcome some of those deficiencies in the same way, just because that requires a little bit more than some guys are able to provide. With Chanel, the early returns are okay. It's going to take some development for him to be worth the draft pick that they spent on him. Now, if you can get a decent contributor, like a good special teams player and a guy who plays 20, 30 snaps at a decent level per game, a third round pick, that's not bad. I tend to have different expectations for draft picks than most people just because most draft picks don't pan out. So it wouldn't make him a terrible pick if he isn't really much more than he is now. He's a good run defender. He doesn't offer a ton in terms of the pass game, at least at this point. We'll see if they start rotating him more in blitz packages. That's what a lot of people are looking for, but we'll see. That's going to be kind of the key to unlocking some of the stuff he can do and him learning some of the responsibilities and some of the zone coverages that Spags likes to do. Thomas Holiday asks, do you think losing to the playoff game to the Bills last year would have felt better than losing how they did to the Bengals? I have this thing with the Chiefs losing, as it often feels so terrible, as a billion stupid things went wrong. To clarify, an identical performance game against the Bills, they just don't tie it up for overtime. I guess losing the coin flip would feel real bad. It's an interesting question, and I guess you can kind of sum it up to, would you rather lose in a really in a really good performance to a really good team, or would you rather lose and that team just beats you, which is kind of what it would have felt like with the Bills there, or would you rather lose because you blew it? I think if I were a player, I think I would rather lose to a really good team, and just lose. I think as a fan or even as an analyst, I would prefer it be because of something they did, because that gives more hope moving forward that that's correctable. Those are things they can fix. It's kind of like the Colts loss. Everyone was pretty bummed last week. It was a tough game. I'm still upset about it. I'm hoping that it doesn't mess with playoff standings or anything like that. But it provided at least hope that, okay, if they don't, as Seren phrased it when I was talking to him yesterday, if they don't shoot off all 10 of their toes, they win that game. And that provides more hope moving forward. Um, Pertrick Meow Holmes, good Lord, that's awesome. Asks, we ever do a film review of Veach? All the pressure was on him to get value out of Tyreek's trade. It looks like he has revitalized the defense with the draft capital. GOAT GM. No, you can't call him GOAT GM when you've got guys that are fleecing the league like Howie Roseman does every year. It's just ridiculous what some of those guys do. And obviously, the early returns on the draft look good. We need to see McDuffie come back and need to see what he does there. And we need to see how he performs. And we need to see Skyy Moore on the field more. On another note with Skyy Moore, keep an eye out on the Chief of the North newsletter. By the time you're watching this, odds are there's an article up there about Skyy Moore. I went back and I watched every single one of his snaps on all 22 just to kind of get a feel for what skill set he has shown in the small sample size he's been on the field. I cover some of the skill sets he shows in the catches he's made, but also times he hasn't been targeted and why I think he needs to be on the field more. So check that out, MinnesotaChiefsFan.substack.com or bit.ly/Seth really hates money. That's where you can get to the deal for $12 a year forever. The price will never go up. And it's just something to take a look at. I enjoyed watching him. I think he's a guy who can contribute more. But we need to see more out of this rookie class. We need to see more, particularly out of Moore and McDuffie. And we need to see how Karlaftis develops, because right now Karlaftis is having some success, but it's mostly within the framework of the defense and executing it well and hustle. And those are great things. It's great that he's able to contribute even before he's winning a lot of one-on-ones. But for him to be kind of a high-level player, he's going to need to start winning more of those one-on-ones. And I think that's going to come for him. It's just going to take a little bit of time. So as of right now, the early returns are good, but we need to see more to know that it really was worth losing out on a guy who really is a game changer. You can see, as much as Chiefs fans don't like to say it, you can see what's going on in Miami and how much of a difference Tyreek Hill makes being added to an already talented roster. He is a Hall of Fame level talent. He's unique. He's one of the best receivers in the league. So you really do need to get a good return. Right now, it's looking like it, and the flexibility they have moving forward looks like it'll be worth it, but we'll see. A lot does depend on the returns you get to it. The process would still be good. The results are going to depend on whether it pans out, and that the results do, at least somewhat, as much as people don't like it, the results do have an effect on how we view the process, and in my opinion, it should, as unfair as that is. Casey asks, should the Chiefs draft a first-round left tackle? Maybe. The problem is, to get a first-round left tackle, you generally speaking have to trade up if you want to get a guy who's a good prospect. That said, the Chiefs do have the draft capital to maybe do that this year, and the trade-off they would be making by doing that would be to have a lot more cap flexibility because they would have a young guy there. And they would not be obviously extending Orlando Brown Jr. So they would have a ton more cap flexibility, which is what you're looking for with the draft anyway. So they could do that. A lot depends on how Orlando Brown plays the rest of the season. He hasn't been great, but he hasn't been as bad as the reputation is. I think he is playing a little bit nicked up. I know he's been listed as a limited participant in practice, that he's got a knee thing. You can see him trying to win with almost all upper body. But that said, if he's going to demand top tackle money, which we know he will, if he doesn't play at least like a top 10 tackle for the rest of the year, that would be a massive risk for the Chiefs to take. And I do think paying above average players elite money is how teams get themselves in salary cap trouble. I think the spending the money isn't the problem. Spending the money is a good thing because you should, in theory, get elite players. But if you're going to spend elite money, you should. The Rams, their general thing is they'll spend elite money, but it's got to be on a Jalen Ramsey. It's got to be on an Aaron Donald. It's got to be on one of those guys that really is a top 5-ish guy at the position. Now, left tackle is a little bit unique because it's such an important position. But at the same time, we have seen some of these young tackles come in and play well. And if you're swapping out above average with Orlando Brown Jr. for average, let's say you can get average play, but you're paying a 15th of the cost with the way offensive line is a sum of the parts, I think that would personally be worth it. And that's a conversation they're going to continue need to have as the year moves along. Lance asks, is it true if you don't use it, you lose it? Nice try, Lance. Not today. Ian DeFries says, if you had to decide now, would you sign OBJ, Orlando Brown Jr. long term for top money? I assume he's wanting top money. If I had to make the choice right now, I wouldn't. I would have last year signed him for almost top tier money, and right now it would be almost the same thing, maybe a little less. So far, it's just tough to say because, like I said, I think he's been playing hurt. It's going to be an entirety of the season decision with him. But I think it's pretty clear that he is not, barring a turnaround once he's healthy again, he's never going to be a top 5 guy. That's becoming more and more clear. We'll see how it goes. But again, we'll see if that clears up a little bit once he's healthy. But right now, the level of play that he's providing is not worth, top money, the top tier money that he's going to ask for. And that's just the way that works. You cannot pay elite money to non-elite players, generally speaking. It doesn't work out no matter what the position that it is, especially when it's at a position where the money has become so crazy. Jeremy McVeigh says, if you could pick any wide receiver to put on the Chiefs right now, who would it be? Tyreek Hill. I mean, he's a great fit for the offense. We know that. So, yeah, if you could take this offense exactly as it is, plug Tyreek Hill in there, I think that would be an insane grouping of talent. And that would be a lot of fun to watch, too. But, I mean, it would either be him or, I mean, there's a few other guys that you would really love to see. Jamar Chase is someone that I think his skill set is just unbelievable. I think he would be a lot of fun. Adam Gabriel Jensen says, it's been suggested Casey was positioning himself for 2023 and beyond with the cap, etc. Thankfully, we're still legit contenders this year. But what's the 2023 splash move? Big free agent, draft trade up, what position and who? Man, that's like 8 questions in one, Adam. The thing that I would say is I think they weren't just looking to position themselves for 2023. They were looking to position themselves for 2023 through 2028. They're looking to position themselves long term. I think in terms of splash moves, it just depends on what happens with Orlando Brown and Chris Jones. Those are 2 really, really important factors here. My hope is one of the splash moves they make is making Chris Jones a Chief for the rest of his career. He's unique. He's an incredible player. It's something that they absolutely should do. The splash move that I think could happen is kind of what we talked about already. If they decided they need to trade up for a left tackle, they have the resources now to do that. They have the flexibility to do it. Then in terms of free agency, I would guess based on how they've built the team, it would be a defensive end of some sort. That would be my guess. Frank Clark's likely not going to be here next year. Carlos Dunlap is probably a 1-year rental guy who's done all right, but he's a veteran. He's been around for a long time. I'm guessing it would be a defensive end, and that would be tough. You'd have to pay a lot of money to bring in a high level talent. Jamarian, I know it's early, but do you think Skyy Moore is the best receiver? I don't think he's the best receiver. I just because we don't have a large enough sample size. But check out the Chiefs of the North newsletter and see what I wrote about in terms of reviewing every snap of his. Kate Keller says, what games do you plan to attend? It would be great to say hi at the tailgate. I will be at the Chiefs-Bills game next week. That's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited for that. I also am planning on being at the Chiefs-Jaguars game, which I know I say Jaguars weird. I'm sorry. It's a Minnesota thing. And I plan on being that actually with a few members of my family. That should be a lot of fun. So I'm actually going to be at a couple games here in the next couple months. That's the plan for right now. Once the playoffs roll around, assuming they make the playoffs, we'll make some plans then. And if I'm going, when I'm going, I'll try to let people know if I am going to be tailgating where they could stop by and say hi. Carnivore by birth. Do we have enough tape to make an assessment of Skyy's hands because they look pretty dang good? Read the newsletter. I appreciate all that. Tells me that I picked the right topic. But again, bit.ly/Seth really hates money. That'll get you subscribed. or if you're already a subscriber, go check it out. Brandon Hurst says, I see some questions about wide receivers from others. What's wrong with our wide receivers? Is it just missing that ridiculousness from Tyreek that Miami is benefiting from? Juju and MVS seem to step up last game. Maybe there's more to come. Absolutely, there's more to come. I think Juju Smith-Schuster and MVS are both guys that have a specific skill set, and they're kind of finding themselves within the offense. That was always going to be the case being in the first year in an Andy Reid offense, not just with Skyy Moore, but with those guys, even though they're veterans. Juju looks comfortable. MVS, our opinion of him would be completely different if Patrick Mahomes hadn't, and they were tough throws. That's what happens with deep balls. But if Patrick Mahomes hadn't overthrown him, what if MVS had another, 120 yards and a pair of touchdowns right now? Statistically, he would look very, very different, and people would be talking about him very, very different. This next one from I Miss Butker, so do I, is one of my favorite ones because it's such a tough question. And we're already at 15 minutes here. I Miss Butker says, when McDuffie returns, who drops down the depth chart, Fenton or Watson? That's a tough question. Fenton is a player I really like. I think he's been a decent corner who plays physical, who knows the defense well. He's really comfortable in zone looks. That said, I think Watson, he had a tough game against Evans. That's another one. If I were to pick one receiver, he'd be up there too. He'd be one of the guys I'd be thinking about because Evans is just an absolute freak of nature. He's so good. And he's not just a jump ball guy either. He's able to get separation on routes. I mean, he's just such a good player. Watson was in position repeatedly. He just got beat by beast catches by Mike Evans with really great throws from Tom Brady. It happens. I think if I were Spagnuolo, if you think I think it's a tough call, but I would really seriously considering keeping the rookie as the third guy in Watson. Fenton won't like it, but he's been passed over before a little bit, and that's going to be tough for him. But at the same time, I do think Watson has shown a little bit more in terms of higher level of play, in terms of how he can make things a little bit tougher for receivers in those man coverage situations. But it's a really tough call. So really, if for them, they see it as relatively equivalent, then I think you probably stick with the veteran until the rookie really forces his way on the field. That's the way they've done things in the past. F. Clint Denisco says, would love to see a Noah Gray breakdown in the future. Do you see him emerging as a good player for this team? He has been more of a he's improved as a blocker. And we'll see with the receiver. He doesn't create a ton of separation on his own, but he's executing the assignments pretty well. And he's shown that he's got the athleticism to do some things in terms of getting down the field as a tight end. I don't ever see him as a number one tight end, but I see him as a guy who could for years be a valuable tight end too. McCole Truther tell me all the things that would have to go wrong for McCole to make all pro this year so it actually happens. That, of course, is a reference to me saying all the things that would have to go wrong for the Colts to beat the Chiefs, and then it happened. McCole Hardman is a guy with a ton of talent who does not necessarily seem to fit in all the time with what the Chiefs are trying to do schematically. There just seem to be mistakes that get made there, and that has not improved. For that to turn around, that would have to snap into focus. And if that snapped into focus, I think he's got elite speed. And he's got quicker feet than he gets credit for. But you'd have to see a high level jump in terms of route running, spacing, and that sort of thing. We got time for just a few more. Man, you guys asked so many questions, and I'm not going to get to remotely enough of them. So I'm going to apologize for that in advance. Charles Hayes III says, right side of the O-line, let's talk about it. Trey Smith played way better against the Bucs. He looked more spry. He looked more agile. And so hopefully he's feeling healthy again. That makes a big difference. Andrew Wiley's a guy that's going to be, he's an average offensive lineman. So it's going to be up and down for him. That's usually the way it works for an average player at the NFL level. It's not like they're just average every game. They're kind of up and down, up and down, up and down. And I think that's what you're going to see from Wiley. It's going to depend on the matchup. In games where they're running the ball well, that's a little more in his bag. He's physical. He's a better run blocker than he is pass protector, in my opinion. Zach, the layman's insider, asked the argument for trading Chris Jones for a variety of mystery boxes in the 2023 draft. And Zach, I appreciate you as ever. Always a fun guy to talk to. If I were to make an argument for trading the best defensive player on the Chiefs roster and the player upon whom their entire pass rush depends to not just completely crater, who also makes standout plays against the run and impacts third down more than almost any other player in the league. You can see the argument for that would be the same argument for trading Tyreek Hill. Long-term flexibility, and if you can get a great offer. Because he's not a wide receiver, I don't know if you'd get that same offer. The market for defensive tackles hasn't blown up the way it has for wide receivers. But for me, in my opinion, to trade Chris Jones, you need to get a similar offer to what you got for Tyreek Hill. Otherwise, it's insane to trade him. And even then, I probably wouldn't do it because guys that affect the quarterback like him are almost impossible to find. And I see what you're trying to do, Zach. You're trying to get me to freak out about the mystery box thing, but that really does with the draft and all that. That idea can eventually become absurd. The mystery box idea. Well, it could even be a boat. We've always wanted one of those when you've got a boat right there. Hey, maybe if we draft a guy, maybe he'll be an elite interior defensive tackle. And so obviously you need to have the mystery boxes because you can't just pay for everything, right? You can't, the salary cap, while it's incredibly flexible, is real enough that you need to hit on draft picks. You need that for long-term flexibility. But there's a limit, and you can't just trade away every elite player. So I made the case for it, and then I immediately explained why I don't believe it. Behind the scenes, Kelsey's 69th burner account says, behind the scenes, do the Chiefs feel the need to add a legitimate wide receiver? The short answer is I think they're comfortable with the group that they have. I haven't heard anything, but I'm not Mr. Insider guy, so I guess we'll find out. This is I've got just a couple more questions that I can take. Zach asked another one that I've got to address. Thoughts on Troy Aikman being in position to make the call when Patrick breaks his TD record on Monday? For those who don't know, several years back on Times Ours, Josh Briscoe made a comment that Patrick Mahomes already had a third of the number of touchdown passes as Troy Aikman. And it wasn't a shot at Troy Aikman. It was more talking about the greatness of Mahomes and how unbelievable he'd been. And then Troy Aikman kind of quote tweeted the thing and talked to me when he's got a third as many Super Bowls. And this is before he'd won a third as many Super Bowls. It's worth noting Troy was on the call when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. So, I mean, that was fun. I don't think Troy Aikman's like this Mahomes hater. He comes across that way occasionally in the broadcast, but I think he's really just trying to break down quarterback play. I do think that would be funny. I don't think it would get acknowledged on there. And I do think that was just him reacting one time kind of pridefully. And I get it. He's got a lot to be proud of in the career he had. He had an incredible career. I'm guessing that was just a one-time prideful reaction. I don't think Troy Aikman has anything against Patrick Mahomes, but it is funny. It would be pretty funny if Mahomes surpassed Aikman's TD total on Monday night, which I think he needs 5 touchdowns to do it. Got time for just a couple more. DT58 says, is Frank Clark the weakest link? In terms of guys seeing significant snaps in the pass rush, yeah, I think so. I think Dunlap's looked a little better than him. I think Karlaftis has looked better than him. Jones has certainly looked better than him. I think Mike Dana has executed some assignments better than him. Well, the Clark and Mike Dana are kind of succeeding in similar ways right now. They're succeeding when they get pressure. It's generally not because they win a one-on-one. It is because they're executing a stunt or they're just playing within the framework of the defense. And I think Dana in limited snaps has done it better than Clark has, which is less than ideal considering the difference in compensation between the two. There's just a couple more that I have to take one because it is about a couple players that are just great players. And then I have to wrap this up. Logan Kalmar asks, or Kalmar, I think, would you rather add prime Jamal Charles or prime Derek Thomas to this team? For most of you, this wouldn't be a hard decision. You'd pick Derek Thomas for obvious reasons. And first, I'll talk about why it's a harder choice for me. I really very much believe, and I've talked about this before. There's a whole segment on it on KCTV5 that I did, where I walked through why I think Jamal Charles is one of the greatest runners to ever live, and I believe that. I will go to the wall defending that. I think it's shown statistically, and I think if you turn on any game that he played in, you can see it. Snap by snap by snap by snap. He was a running back where if he didn't gain 4 or 5 yards, you were shocked. And when he gained 7 or 8 yards, you were like, yep, that's about right. I mean, it wasn't just about breaking a few long runs and then, -1, -2, 1, 2, whatever. He was so consistently good. He was just such an incredible runner. And I think with this offensive line, I think he would do some incredible, incredible things. And I would place defenses that they're playing at an incredible disadvantage in terms of how they try to play them. I don't know what teams would do in terms of this too high, because I think Jamal Charles would probably run for 6.5, 7 yards a pop behind this line. So I don't know what teams would do. I really don't. That said, Derek Thomas is one of the 3 greatest pass rushers to ever live, maybe 4. If you've got a Mount Rushmore of just pass rushers, you've got Taylor, White, Donald, and Thomas. Now, I'm sure someone's going to be like, yes, but you're forgetting. And yes, there's been a lot of really, really, really great pass rushers, but I think that would be your Mount Rushmore. And so anytime you can add a Mount Rushmore pass rusher, you almost have to do it. And particularly for the Chiefs, because pass rush is one of they're not terrible at it, but they're not good at it in particular outside of Jones. You add Thomas to that, and now you've got 2 elite guys, and you have 3 or 4 competent guys to sprinkle around them. Whereas right now you've got 1 elite guy and 3 or 4 competent guys, and it just raises the entire ceiling. So it would have to be Thomas, but it's harder for me than it would be for other people. But I've never claimed to be objective when it comes to Jamal Charles. All right, that's all the time I have. I'm sorry for the questions that I didn't get to. Your questions were all so good that they took time to answer. I'm looking forward to breaking down the Raiders game. Make sure to check out the other videos that Gary and Dan and Ryan, the whole team here, is doing. Just Sean. All of them. Just such a great team here. They do a great job. Check out the NFL 33 Substack that Ryan and Dan are working so hard at. They're doing a great job. Check out my stuff if you feel so inclined. I appreciate you guys watching. I cannot wait to watch the Chiefs play the Raiders. Primetime Monday Night Football. It should be a lot of fun. And this week, just as much as any week, it is a great week to be a Chiefs fan. Thanks, guys.